Hi everyone. So I said I wanted to cover more of the issues that are going on in the UK. I've got quite a few things coming up. So I will be looking at um, the review into Vikram Digwa's unduly lenient sentence. So that is going on, and I'll do a video on that. I've also got some videos as well ready to put together on issues such as the online safety bill and this new social media ban for under 16s. I have quite a lot to say on that. But yesterday we had the report from Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry. It was released, and what I've done is I've read it. I'm not going to read every word and do a read through like I often do, because it's a heavy subject and it's over 200 pages long. So what I've done is I have put together a PowerPoint, sort of summarizing some pertinent points. But I also want to talk about some of the mainstream media as well and what's going on. And I wanted to start with this clip. This is from GB News's Martin Daubney, and he is interviewing a Labour MP. I want to start with that, and then kind of take apart what the Labour MP is saying. So I'm going to play a series of short clips, but we'll start with Martin Daubney.
It's not fake news to tell the truth. It's not fake news to challenge power. It's not fake news to do your job. It's my job to challenge parliamentarians. That's what I did. He said it was fake news. Go and have a look how the Labour Party voted on that grooming gang inquiry, and we'll see who's telling the fake news.
Martin, there's a fundamental principle driving what we have done, which is that we have looked in the eyes of billionaires running tech platforms and we've said enough is enough. We're putting all our power behind British families, parents and young people in this country, as we did with Grok, where we stood down the richest man in the world, protected women and girls in this country. We're protecting kids in Britain. That's the most important principle.
Is this really about child protection, or is it really about something else? Control, censorship?
Well, look, one of the things we're trying to crack down on for young people is fake news. And so I dispute the fake news that we're not being tough on grooming gangs. We've got robust inquiries
that crack down on
every single question, leave no stone unturned.
Your party voted against the rape gang inquiry until you were kicked, dragging into it. And by the way, may I add, a lot of the pressure that was placed upon you was from Elon Musk on X.
This is true.
Martin, in this country we have beautiful free speech. Here I am as a government minister engaging in a debate with a channel owned by foreign billionaires, companies in Dubai, putting tons of money into the pockets of reform owners as well. But I'm here to debate you because free speech is important. But there's a line, and at the moment you're crossing that line in terms of fake news. As you know very well, we've consistently
What's fake news about anything I've just said? Tell me anything I've just said that's fake news. Go on. What have I just said? Anything that's fake news?
Very simple thing. Very simple thing. Well, Martin, I've told you twice, but let me tell you a third time. We have consistently backed inquiries against grooming gangs. We will lay no stone unturned in making sure that women, girls, young people in this country are fully supported, kept safe online and offline.
Did you vote in favour of a grooming gang, or did you vote against it, sir?
I have always backed the toughest measures against grooming gangs in this country.
OK, but my point is, you just accused me of fake news. I want to know what I said that you think is fake news. That's a serious allegation to make. You're a government minister. We're an Ofcom regulated TV channel, and you're calling us fake news. What?
I've told you three times. I've told you three times. Let me tell you a fourth time. You said specifically that this government has not supported action against grooming gangs. That is incorrect. We have consistently supported tough, robust action against grooming gangs, offline and online. We're on the side of young people and families in this country, not tech billionaires and millionaires.
Kanisha Narayan, I also pointed out to you that a majority of Labour Party parliamentarians voted against the grooming gang inquiry until the public backlash was so huge, you had to do a U-turn on it. These are the facts. That's not fake news. It's not fake news to tell the truth.
Yeah, so just kind of sort of hammer home there. What Martin Daubney says is absolutely right. the Labour Party voted against the grooming gang inquiry. And there was such a backlash that they had to do a U-turn, and that was largely because of people like Elon Musk, and in particular X. So there's a lot going on. I'm not gonna kind of go into the attempts to censor. I've done videos on all the arrests for online tweets, and which I'll put a link to in the video description. But I've also got a video lined up as well to look at the online safety bill and the under-16s social media ban, which, in my opinion, I think is a backdoor to bring in digital ID, which again is something that the public have fiercely backlashed against and do not want. It was never even put to us as a referendum. But with the introduction of the social media ban, now all adults will have to provide something to prove who they are. And rightly so, the country is sceptical about the motives here. So I think what we'll do is just very quickly look at how the grooming gang inquiry was voted on, and then look at how that specific MP, Labour MP Kanishka Narayan, voted. Let's just see if what he says checks out.
The ayes to the right, 111. The noes to the left, 364.
I can hear the chamber not happy already.
The ayes to the right were 111. The noes to the left, 364. So the noes have it. The noes have it.
Okay. Let's because there is, we have ways of working out how each MP voted. So you can look up your own MP. And I've already put this guy's name into that. And as you can see, he voted no. So for him to be on GB News saying, I've always consistently voted for a grooming gang inquiry, is absolute bullshit. And I think that's what makes people so angry about this, is they didn't want to do it. They voted against it. And then when the public reacted, they were forced into another U-turn, one of many. And now they're sort of portraying this as, oh, we always wanted to do this. We've always wanted to be tough on grooming gangs. No, they have not. And I'm going to go a little further, actually, because Rupert Lowe held a parliamentary committee on his grooming gang inquiry before the release of the report yesterday. And one of the MPs, Essa McVeigh, who is a Conservative MP, actually, she actually stood up and spoke about what she learned. I think she was invited to be involved, and she did accept that. And she was very critical of the inquiry that the Labour Party are now. I don't want to say they're doing it because they haven't done anything. It took them forever to even pick a chair, and the chair is not impartial at all. 6 survivors quit, and I did videos on them, which I will put links to in the video description. 6 survivors quit because they were told they couldn't mention anything about race or religion. So they were effectively still being silenced on one of the pertinent points of all of this. And then Jess Phillips went into the House of Commons and called them liars. That's how, so far, Labour have dealt with this mess. But I just want to play Essa McVeigh's words, because I think they're very important, very powerful.
Esther McVeigh. Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, Dame Siobhan. And I welcome today's debate but it is deeply disappointing that such a debate is needed. And we are only here because of the outcry from the public, outraged by a government and public institutions that continue to shy away from questions on ethnicity, immigration status and religion. We have also seen how the government's official inquiry into grooming gangs has not only moved at a glacial pace, but has also appointed one of their own, a Labour peer, to chair it, and involved a former council chief executive and a chair of the NHS Foundation Trust as panel members. Exactly what the survivors expressly said they did not want to happen, handing the inquiry over to people from the very institutions under investigation. Meanwhile, the Honourable Member for Great Yarmouth has got on with the job and has put the government to shame with his independent rape inquiry, which heard 10 days of evidence in February and will report the finding next week. And I don't know if the word is fortunate enough to be a part of that panel, but when asked, I accepted it. And quite honestly, it was horrifying what we were told. Horrendous stories of rape. And it wasn't just rape, although that's bad enough. It was torture. Women battered, strangled, cut, whipped until they were close to death, and then brought back round to be raped again over a sustained period of time, because nobody wanted to believe what they said when they reached out to the institutions that should have been looking after them. Some reaching out to the children's homes they were in, paid thousands of pounds a week and a year to look after them, and they were let down. Why? Because they were white, working-class girls, many vulnerable that people did not want to listen to and call them literally white trash. And they allowed others, elders they saw in a community, to be above reproach, and therefore they did not investigate at all. This is not a political football, a right-wing bandwagon, or a dog whistle issue. This is about life-altering suffering and abuse of the most shocking kind. Suffering and abuse that could have been prevented, and the survivors deserve to know the truth about the failings that was allowed to happen. I would hope that all of us here today can agree that the only thing that really matters is protecting children, and that we must do everything to put them first.
Okay, so now I've gone through them, I want to go through the PowerPoint I've put together summarising the grooming gang inquiry. Sorry I didn't get the video of Esther McVeigh on the screen initially at the start. I'm not a producer. Some people may have, who have followed me with other cases, will know. But I want to go through this, and then at the end I've got a video clip of Sammy Woodhouse, one of the grooming gang survivors. She is doing an interview on Good Morning Britain, which was it was absolutely brilliant, and she really took them to task. Very proud of her, just full respect for doing that. And I will kind of finish with that. So, the grooming gangs. Okay, so obviously we got the backstory now of what happened with Labour and the inquiry, their initial decision to vote against an inquiry, and then their backtrack. And even when they backtracked and said, fine, we'll do it. Firstly, it was to public pressure. And secondly, it was, everything about it was just completely wrong. They were, the chair who was appointed was one of their own, so to speak. Also someone who represented the institutions, which is accused of failing these young people who were groomed and gang raped. So Rupert Lowe, many people will know him. He was originally in Reform. he has now set up his own party, Restore Britain, which is doing incredibly well. Given that it's only a few months old, it is really, really doing well. I'm not going to go into the whole background of Rupert Lowe and what happened with reform. I just don't think it's relevant here. But his report into his so they crowdfunded basically to do an inquiry and worked with the survivors, and the report was released yesterday. So it's an investigative report examining the widespread sexual exploitation of vulnerable girls by organised networks, the decades of institutional neglect that enabled it, and the urgent reforms required to deliver justice and prevent future abuse. And that's my kind of, first page summary of what this report includes. Okay, so scale and nature of the crimes. So there were over 250,000 white girls who have been estimated to have been subjected to repeated rape, trafficking, and sexual exploitation across multiple decades. These were not isolated incidents. They constituted a pattern of organised network criminality operating with near total impunity. And I think the report actually says that this grooming gang scandal actually goes back to the 1950s. That's 70 years, which should just horrify anyone. Perpetrators passed victims between locations, cities, and individuals. Abuse was frequently recorded and used as blackmail to ensure silence and continued compliance. So the gangs operated with deliberate coordination, exploiting transport infrastructure, care homes, and social services referral pathways to identify and access vulnerable children. Victims were often groomed through false affection before being passed to wider networks. Children as young as 4 years old were targeted, groomed, and subjected to repeated sexual violence by multiple perpetrators. So the report also highlights the perpetrator demographics, which is the bit that the government is trying to pretend does not exist. 87% of the perpetrators had Muslim names, right? That's of the convicted grooming gang offenders. 87% of them bore identifiably Muslim names in available conviction data. There are broader estimates though. 95% of the perpetrators are estimated Muslim, and that accounts for unreported cases, which suggests approximately 95% of perpetrators are Muslim, predominantly of Pakistani heritage. There are 25,000 plus victims estimated, largely girls subjected to grooming, rape, and trafficking across England over several decades. The overrepresentation of men from Pakistani Muslim communities in convictions is a documented statistical reality, one that authorities were frequently reluctant to acknowledge publicly. Repeat offending and large group operations are characteristic patterns in the available case data. The report also talks about the institutional failure. So it's not just looking at the perpetrators directly, it's also looking at who else participated in this, who was part of the cover-up, who helped facilitate this, who failed these young girls. And it says that across every layer of the safeguarding system, the police, social services, care homes, schools, and local government, there is documented evidence of sustained failure to protect children from exploitation. which is just absolutely shocking. Police negligence. Officers dismissed victim reports as fabrications, labelled children as willing participants, and in some cases destroyed evidence. Victims were criminalised rather than protected. Social services inaction. Social workers repeatedly closed cases without investigation. Children referred from care homes were discharged without protection plans, leaving them exposed to further exploitation. There were education failures. Schools excluded rather than supported victims. Signs of grooming, unexplained absences, older associates, behavioural changes were routinely ignored or misattributed. And then the transport and licensing industry. Taxi licensing authorities received intelligence about drivers involved in exploitation but failed to act, revoke licenses or refer cases to the police. The taxi network became a key enabler of the trafficking. And that would kind of came on to display, really, because when the proposal was put forward to have CCTV in the taxi and transport industry, there was pushback from the taxi drivers, and it made no sense because it would have protected them as well. But now we know more, it begins to make sense, sadly. Political correctness as a shield for abuse. A central thread running through every inquiry and case review is the role of institutional fear, specifically the fear of being labelled racist or Islamophobic in suppressing investigation and action. And we are not just seeing that in the grooming gang situation, the rape gang situation. We are seeing that in many cases. I've done a video on the Henry Novak murder, where the police did not believe Henry Novak when he said that he had been stabbed and could not breathe. And that judgment was clearly based on the fact that his skin was white. And the person he was accusing of attacking him, of stabbing him, was not. They also listened to the perpetrator who screamed racism, even though that was a lie. They did absolutely nothing to investigate. And we are seeing this time and time and time again. The 3 people who were murdered in Nottingham were they were murdered by a black man who should have been sectioned, but was not sectioned because the institution assessing him were concerned about the overrepresentation of black men who were being sectioned, who were being detained under the Mental Health Act. Something that should not have even been a factor. Had he been detained, those 3 people in Nottingham would still be alive today. That is the brutal truth of that situation. And then you had the Stockport murder. People who protested in Stockport, who wrote a tweet online expressing their anger and outrage about the situation, were arrested and some of them imprisoned. And that should not have happened. How can we have a situation where people are supposed to say nothing about a heinous crime for fear of being locked up? Whereas had they expressed that outrage about a white perpetrator, then they would not have been locked up. That is where we are in the UK now. Police officers and social workers and council officials have testified that they were discouraged from pursuing cases or recording ethnicity data, lest their actions trigger accusations of discrimination. This self-censorship operated as a structural protection for perpetrator networks, allowing abuse to continue unchecked for decades. And again, it's not just on race that two important identifiers, right? When it used to be anyway, the police turned up and asked you to describe the person, your alleged perpetrator. If they had committed a crime, you were reporting a crime, and the police would want, a description of the perpetrator. And that always included identifying features such as race was one of them, because it's important, but also gender, like the sex. Was it a man or a woman? Currently, those two things are not asked for. It's frowned upon if you try to say them. So it's not just race. You cannot say, I was raped by a man. Because if that man claims to be a woman, that's it, it's accepted. He gets the luxury of a woman's prison. It's like an early Christmas present. A rape victim would have to go into court and use, she, her pronouns for the person who raped her. And if she didn't, she would be condemned quite severely. She had to show respect to someone who showed her no respect. We are now living in a backwards dystopian society. That's all I can say on that. Labour-controlled local authorities in Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford and other towns are documented to have prioritised electoral relationships with South Asian communities over the protection of working-class white girls. And that's exactly it. Girls are being sacrificed for votes. And, that is still true today. So there's a quote here: they were more afraid of being called racist than they were of the children being raped. And that testimony is cited in multiple independent inquiries. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse confirmed that political and cultural sensitivities directly impeded the safeguarding of victims in multiple towns and cities. And that's an absurd situation to be in. It does not matter. You need to be able to be accurate in your reporting. And, there needs to be accuracy with white natives too. This is not about race. But when there is a mindset and there is a disproportionate number of a certain demographic, that needs to be called out. Yes, there were definitely some white people involved in these grooming gangs. Absolutely. No one is saying differently. It's the disproportionate amount of the Pakistani Muslim men. And that is, that's a concerning fact. And it needs to be tackled head on, not shied away from. What I really loved about the report is it gave the survivors a voice and a platform. So behind these statistics, as always, there are individual lives that have been devastated by exploitation and compounded by institutional abandonment. So the following testimonies are representative of hundreds of cases documented in police files, inquiry reports and victim advocacy records. Okay, so the first person, Chloe, she was targeted from age 10, groomed through gifts and false affection before being passed to a wider network. She was raped at age 11. When she reported the abuse, authorities expressed disbelief. Several perpetrators were never prosecuted. And then we have Fiona. Now, I believe that's Fiona Goddard, who is one of the survivors who withdrew from Labour's, the government's grooming inquiry, and one of the people that Jess Phillips referred to as a liar. Fiona entered the care system and was identified by a grooming gang operating near her children's home. Staff were aware of suspicious visitors, but took no protective action. Fiona suffered years of trafficking before receiving any formal support. And then we have Jane, Leanne, Eleanor, and Kate. Each experienced severe sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Their medical and social care records were, in several cases, lost or destroyed, obstructing subsequent prosecutions and denying victims the acknowledgement of their experiences. The impact on victims, lifelong consequences. So obviously there's going to be physical and psychological harm, and the report lays that out bare. Survivors of grooming gang exploitation carry profound and lasting injuries. Many endured repeated physical violence in addition to sexual assault, resulting in permanent physical disability in the most severe cases. Unwanted pregnancies, including those resulting from rape at very young ages, caused additional medical trauma. Mental health consequences are near universal among documented survivors. Post-traumatic stress disorder, clinical depression, anxiety disorders, and substance dependency acquired during the period of exploitation as a coping mechanism introduced by perpetrators. And the long-term impact, suicidal ideation and attempts documented across multiple survivor cohorts, disrupted education and employment prospects, fractured family relationships, often blamed on the victim's behaviour during exploitation. Children born from rape requiring specialist safeguarding, a group currently without formal recognition in legislation. Ongoing risk from perpetrators who were never prosecuted or were released having served minimal sentences. The suppression of whistleblowers. Those who attempted to raise the alarm, police analysts, social workers, journalists, and activists, frequently faced professional and legal retaliation rather than institutional support. Internal reports were buried. Analysts within police forces and councils who compiled evidence of organised exploitation had their findings suppressed, ignored, or actively discredited by senior management. There was professional retaliation. Whistleblowers faced disciplinary proceedings, demotion, or constructive dismissal. Some were investigated under misconduct procedures for raising child protection concerns. There was legal suppression. Contempt of court proceedings and reporting restrictions were used to criminalise journalists, covering ongoing trials, limiting public awareness and political accountability. Reputation over safety. Institutional self-protection consistently took precedent over child safeguarding. Authorities prioritised avoiding scandal over preventing ongoing abuse. Racial and religious dimensions. Targeted selection of victims. Survivor testimony and case evidence consistently indicate that victims were selected on the basis of their ethnicity and perceived vulnerability. Non-Muslim girls, overwhelmingly white and working class, were deliberately targeted with perpetrators including racial and religious language to dehumanize victims and justify exploitation. Reports of forced participation in religious ceremonies, use of Islamic scripture to justify abuse, and pressure toward conversion have been documented across multiple survivor accounts and in court proceedings. The community silence. The exploitation was known within communities, but cultural norms around loyalty to the Ummah, the Muslim community, coupled with the perception that non-Muslim girls were of lesser moral worth, facilitated silence among those who might otherwise have reported what they knew. These dynamics require careful evidence-based examination, not to indict an entire community, but to understand the cultural and ideological factors that enabled organised abuse and obstructed internal accountability. The report also came with recommendations for reform. And these sought to prevent future exploitation. Preventing future exploitation requires structural reform across law enforcement, social care, the legal framework, and public health. The following recommendations are drawn from inquiry findings, survivor advocacy, and legal analysis. Firstly, the criminal justice. There needs to be harsher mandatory sentencing for organised child sexual exploitation. Mandatory recording of ethnicity, religion, and immigration status in all child sexual exploitation cases, and then deportation of foreign national offenders upon sentence completion. Safeguarding. There needs to be early intervention programs targeting at-risk children, civil orders to disrupt grooming networks, mandatory annual training for all frontline professionals on exploitation indicators and legal duties. Survivor support. There needs to be a statutory NHS duty of care for child sexual exploitation survivors, trauma-informed treatment pathways including compassion-focused therapy, formal recognition of children born from rape as a vulnerable group requiring specialist safeguarding, and finally, data and accountability. Dedicated police units for child sexual exploitation with national coordination frameworks, multi-agency data sharing obligations, public authorities held legally liable for failures of care through negligence and human rights claims. And those are the reforms that the report recommended. A call for justice and accountability. The abuse documented in this report did not happen in the shadows because it was impossible to detect. It happened in plain sight and was ignored, dismissed and covered up by the institutions charged with protecting the most vulnerable children in our society. For survivors, there needs to be a full recognition of harm suffered, access to civil litigation, compensation, and comprehensive long-term care. No further re-traumatization through inadequate police or judicial processes. For institutions, there needs to be mandatory public inquiries at a local level where national investigations have not reached, accountability for officials who suppressed evidence or silenced whistleblowers. There needs to be legislative reform to remove barriers to investigation. And then for society, there needs to be an honest, evidence-led national conversation about the cultural and organisational failures that have enabled decades of abuse. Truth before reputation, children before politics. And then finally, and I think this is incredibly important, I wanted to just acknowledge courage and resilience where it appears. I would like to extend my profound gratitude and respect to Rupert Lowe, to all the brave survivors who shared their stories, and to every individual whose relentless hard work and dedication were instrumental in this vital rape gang inquiry. Your unwavering bravery and commitment has shone a critical light on systemic failures and paved the way for justice and accountability for victims, and hopefully, an improvement. We can, start to improve the UK and life here. It does not matter what side of the political debate that you're on. It does not matter whether you support the left or you support the right. It is not far right to recognise a man who has made a promise to conduct an inquiry and then keeps that promise and delivers the report. And they're not done. This is just phase one. There will be naming of individuals who've been complicit in this. There will be private prosecutions. And I believe that if Restore Britain get into power in 2029, there could well be, actual reform to the law and to social policy to allow, changes that will prevent this. And it's shameful that people who are on the far left are just so dismissive of this. Many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young girls have suffered, and they have been let down by organizations and institutions who should have helped them. And I have first-hand experience of that myself. And there is nothing worse really than when you go through a traumatic experience and then you report it to the police, you report it to social services, you try to engage the NHS or the education services, and you ask for help and they shut you down, silence you, and they don't help. They just sweep it under a carpet like it didn't happen. I've been through that. I've been very open about some of my experiences as well. Mine were around domestic violence and marital rape. It wasn't a grooming gang situation, but I understand what it's like to experience an injustice, such a severe injustice, and then be let down. And there needs to be a change. There needs to be a huge change in this country. And it's not about being on a particular side at all. It's got nothing to do with that. If anyone who supports the Labour Party or the Green Party reads this report and just dismisses it and says, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It does matter. Why would you think it doesn't matter? What if you were one of these girls who had suffered this? Would you still feel like that? What if it was someone you knew? We have also had white young girls, they have been forced into these kind of marriages against their will. They have been forced into unwanted pregnancies, forced abortions. There have been honor killings. And I'm sorry, that's just incompatible with not just Western values, but British values. And there is no excuse for it. So I wanted to just kind of finish with some good news. Now, I don't think this is as a result of Rupert Lowe's report, but this came in yesterday, that the first batch of grooming gangs cases, they are being returned to the police to reinvestigate. I don't know what that's going to bring, right? I'm open to anything. For me, I don't love the fact that, the police can cause a series of mistakes or failures and then they get to investigate themselves. I don't love that. I don't know if it's going to do any good to return cases to the same people who already failed at them the first time. But it's action. It is something. And then I just going to give the last words really to Sammy Woodhouse, who appeared on Good Morning Britain yesterday. Did a great job. Held them to account because before she went on, she was asked by the editor not to mention the race of the perpetrators, right? Again, this is a repeat pattern. This is what the government asked of the survivors too when they, recruited them for their sham inquiry. It was, don't mention race. When Jess Phillips was called out, she called them liars. So they released the emails proving that they were in fact not lying and had been asked, don't mention race. But this is Sammy Woodhouse. Huge shout out to her, and well done for, calling out GMB. It is so important. Like you say, it's talking about race, and especially where, and it's in court documents that there was a cultural led for it. This rape was like, it was a cultural thing, and it was impacted by cultural and religious factors. So it's already in the court documents, it's publicly available court documents, and therefore there is no need to not say it out loud. There's no need for anyone to be saying to the victims, you can't say that. But GMB News did try to do that. I'm not saying it was Ed Balls here or Susanna Reid. They come across like they didn't even know that the conversation had happened, and it was an editor before she went on to the program. She has since received an apology from the editor. But let's have a look at this interview.
8:45. Well, our main news this morning is the fact that the National Crime Agency is ordering police forces across the country to reopen their grooming gang investigations. Not just another inquiry, but actually reopen and reinvestigate cases going back as far as 2010. It's part of Operation Beaconport, and it is the biggest investigation of its kind in the country's history.
So joining us from Rotherham is campaigner and grooming gang survivor Sammy Woodhouse. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is the National Crime Agency sending cases which were not properly investigated back to the same police forces which failed to engage properly 5, 10, 15 years ago. Do you believe that the police can get it right second time round?
No, I don't, and that's because I've seen firsthand the failures and the negligence and the corruption that has been playing out, not just, back in 1999 when it was happening to me, but currently, this is still going on. I mean, for example, I'm leading the rape gang inquiry that was set up by MP Rupert Lowe. I recently contacted the National Crime Agency. This is only a couple of months ago, by the way. And I said to him, there's a lady, she wants to go on record. She's got evidence about trafficking, about rape, about the murder of multiple children, and they can't even be bothered to reply to my email. Now, when we announced quite recently that we were going to start naming the individuals involved and the professionals, because this weren't just about the gangs operating, they was allowed to operate. We had 3 further contacts on the NPCC, I think it's for about a week. So in those emails, they said that they wanted to try and safeguard the people that we was going to name. So there still seems to be a focus on protecting the individuals that caused this, rather than protecting the victims. And as we know, there's been a lot of government corruption throughout these cases. Our report, which was released today, shows that this goes back as early as the 1950s. And, if I can just say, just some of the things that children have been through. Children have been groomed, raped, abused, tortured, trafficked, criminalised, impregnated, murdered, blamed. As we know, there was a lot of people that would dare go near the grooming gangs because the majority of the perpetrators were Pakistani Muslim men, and that people was, afraid to be called racist or Islamophobic. And unfortunately, those conversations are still going on. We're still sat here in 2026 and can't have an open and honest conversation about what's happening to children in our country.
It's interesting, Sammy, you say that because, Baroness Louise Casey did a report, June 2025, and said, despite a lack of a full picture in the national data set, there is enough evidence now available in local police data in 3 police force areas, which she examined, which show disproportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds amongst suspects for group-based child sexual exploitation. What do you think? You are sort of almost rejecting what the NCA is doing today. What would
I'm not rejecting it.
Okay.
I welcome it. We should be doing absolutely everything in our power. But
I don't want to mischaracterise what you said. It's just that you don't have trust in the police forces sort of examining their homework. Yeah. So
what you've got to remember is that there's been police officers being involved in raping these children, and as I said, we still don't want to have certain conversations around the fact that majority were Muslim men. I mean, I spoke to your colleague earlier before coming on, and he said I weren't even allowed to announce the race and talk about race. Do you know how disrespectful it is for people like me that have lived this, that have exposed it, that have been through absolute hell and back, to still be told we're not allowed to talk about the race of some of these perpetrators after everything that we've been through. Well, it's just disgusting. Yeah,
I can assure you, Sammy, we've been talking about race all morning. I promise you, we've been talking about kind of race and the fact that the grooming gangs in some parts of the country had a particular Asian ethnic male.
Hundreds of places around the country. We've identified this in the report that's going to be published today. It is throughout the entire United Kingdom. Children as young as 4 years old sold and trafficked from Scotland to London. You know, I met back in 2015 with David Cameron when he was the Prime Minister. I told him all about this. The Tory party have done very little. Look at the Labour Party. This was all happening. Under their council. That's how I exposed it in the first place, because I named the Labour politician Jahangir Akhtar. Then we've got Reform saying, oh, well, we're not going to do anything if we get in power in 3 years' time. You know, we've got politicians in these political parties that have sacrificed people for votes and still are. There's still not enough being done. And as I say, it's absolutely fantastic that we're going to get some people off the streets, but there are hundreds of thousands of perpetrators walking free. They are, thousands of professionals that have never, ever been held to account. How many professionals in this country have actually, been held to account for what they've done? Yeah. Like I say, it weren't just about turning a blind eye. They was directly involved in raping the children. You had, perpetrators and their family members that were police officers, that were politicians, that was allowing them to get away with this. It's corruption right up to the Home Office. I mean, the Home Office know about my case and their entire operations from right back as 1999.
Sammy, I hear what you're saying, and I hope you feel that you have been given space to say what you want to say on our programme this morning, and we're not shying away from addressing the facts that you are, explaining on
Why
air.
did you say that then? I'm not blaming you, but I'm just saying, why was that said to me then?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know what that. I mean, obviously, the first time hearing about that conversation is what you're saying, but I have just referred to the fact that Baroness Louise Casey, in her own report, addressed.
We should never ever shy away from anything. I don't care what race or religion a person is. If you are raping and trafficking children, we must do everything in our power to stop it. And those conversations, comments like that, what he said earlier, that's the reason why people like me have never wanted to come forward. We're just constantly being silenced.
And we're not silencing you this morning. I hope you feel that. And in fact, the conclusion of Baroness Casey's report was more effort is required, and in particular, the ethnicity of perpetrators and offender motivations in order to understand it better. And
our report certainly doesn't shy away from race and religion. That is published today, so I hope everyone, watching this will give that a read. And, that gives survivors a platform. We've started criminal investigations. We've started lawsuits against, police councils, NHS. Stage 3, we are going to be naming those individuals, and then we're going to be doing private prosecutions. So I just hope that everybody around the country, including you as mainstream media, will do everything in your power to get the truth out about what is happening to children in the UK.
Thank you very much indeed, Sammy, for joining us this morning and for being so clear. We are kind of joined by former police officer Child Protection.
So just to kind of point out for those who don't know, this man here on the left, Ed Balls, is a former Labour politician himself. Used to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer. His wife is currently the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Just, I think I just need saying, but Sammy Woodhouse, absolutely clear as day, took no prisoners, no nonsense approach, and I was here for it. So well done to her. I will put links to the gang rape report in my video description, along with links to all of the video clips I've played, and Sammy's X account as well. So you can all have a look through what you want to look through. But thank you for joining me. This is not an easy subject, but it's definitely one that needs to be addressed. Okay, thanks guys.